Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. Okay, so artificial intelligence has created many helpful improvements to book publishing, such as improving discoverability of books and finding copy or editing errors in manuscripts. And there are many more to come as technology advances. But is there a downside to some of these advancements? For example, will advancements cost people jobs? So, joining us on the podcast today to discuss these issues is Authors AI and BingeBooks co-founder and CEO Alessandra Torre. Hello, welcome.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. This is my favorite topic. I am very excited for this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. And you know what sparked this episode is you all have a member benefit with IBPA members with your program Marlowe Pro. It's an awesome member benefit, and we did a webinar, and I was really interested. So people were really excited about what it offers, but then there was also all this discussion about like people's concerns about just AI and technology with publishing, and I was like, oh, I had no idea that like they were acting like Skynet.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, okay. So I was like, this is really interesting. I want to talk to you. Okay, so first, can you tell us about Marlowe Pro and then how like it benefits indie publishers?
Sure. So Marlowe is our artificial intelligence at Authors AI. We call her Marlowe, and if I refer to her, it will be as referring to her as if she is a person because she feels like that to us. But Marlowe, her bread and butter, you know, her whole life basically has been about reading fiction and analyzing bestsellers. So that was how she got her start. Her technology was originally born way back with a book, The Bestseller Code, which is a fascinating read if you're at all interested in analytics and fiction. But basically, she was trained on and learned everything there was to know about what makes a best-selling novel, and what we called a best-selling novel was a book that had been on the New York Times list for 10 weeks or longer, right? So not just kind of a quick bestseller, but what kind of stuck around as a bestseller. So that was what she knew everything about, and she understands is the difference between a great book and a good book and a good book and a bad book. And so we were originally using her technology, and we are still now, to an author can submit their manuscript. She will read it, and she will provide 32 pages of feedback that analyzes everything from the plot to the characters to your pacing to best-selling books that are comparable, that sort of thing. So that is how her technology initially was focused. And then as we began to get deeper and deeper into the different things that she could do, we realized kind of the future possibilities when it came to more detailed book comparisons, because that was where authors really seemed to gravitate, was the books that were similar to theirs. And right now, her comparisons are just from a very small corpus of bestsellers, a couple hundred bestsellers. But that is where our data scientists have really been focused in the last few years, is going deeper into book recommendations for readers, as well as giving that information to authors. So because where I see a giant hole in the market right now is readers read a book, they love it, and they want something similar. And them trying to find a book that is similar is like, you know, a treasure hunt. I mean, they're going to ask some people, they're going to get a variety of different opinions, and they're getting opinions from people who might have read, you know, 20, 30 books that year, if they're lucky. You know, and we all have different biases, right? We all have different things that we prefer in books that we read. So I love the idea of an AI coming in that is completely non-biased, that can read a manuscript and recommend and look at, you know, she's like a super librarian, look in her database of hundreds of thousands of books and find the exact similar, you know, twin to that book in terms of story or style or pacing or subject matter. So that's kind of where her technology now is focused on, that and helping publishers and distributors kind of mine and understand their backlist more.
Yeah, and for discoverability too, like if you, let's say people like something as specific as like a mystery set in Virginia with like a clown protagonist. Yeah. And like, it's like, that is very specific, but
that's
maybe, yeah, right? But like you were saying, if they go into a bookstore, you know, then a person might not, you know, be able to recommend that. But like a computer will be able to go, there's 20,000 books like that. And then, you know, obviously the drawback is you have to then figure out, okay, are all of those good, quote unquote, right?
Right.
So then the technology has to be designed so that it's like whatever's the top rated will be the first recommended, that kind of stuff.
100%. And it's one of those things that unfortunately right now, booksellers and publishers and readers are going off of metadata and packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so whoever is winning that game,
Mm-hmm.
right, those are the books that are being shown. And those are the books that are being purchased. And then those are the books that are showing up in also boughts. But if you've got, after 50 Shades of Grey, we had tens of thousands of books saying the next 50 Shades of Grey. Well,
they were all amazing.
Right. Oh, right. what actually is the closest book? Because it wasn't just the sex that people liked in that book. There were also, it was also different things. So what really is like the closest twin? And we've talked to distributors about this too, because it's like, or booksellers we've talked to about it, because if they have 50 books about, I don't know, how to score the perfect job, they have no idea which one to put on the shelf, right? Like they're playing a guessing game. And so if an AI could say, oh, I'm going to rank these books in terms of best to worst. And granted, that's a bad example because we're really focused on fiction, but there's another AI, I'm sure, that could do this. There isn't, but there could be. Could rank it from best to worst. That would really help them make those decisions about what to provide to readers.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into, like, when we were doing the webinar, one of the things that publishers and the attendees, they thought, okay, there's obviously amazing applications for something like this. But then they were concerned. They were like, okay, what if publishers start getting manuscripts? They run it through these AI programs and they're like, well, this is not going to be a bestseller because it doesn't fit this particular formula. And before even reading something, they just are trashing these books. And they were like, well, there are a lot of books that are amazing that don't fit a formula. So anyway, I wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think, especially right now, like we personally Authors AI doesn't have a bestseller score, right? And that's something that publishers have asked for repeatedly. And it's something that we could do. We could put a bestseller score on there. And I think it's more where publishers' focus has been, or where our focus has been, is more on if a publisher says, Where the Crawdad Sings, we want a book like Where the Crawdad Sings. Marlowe can say which books in their acquisition pile are closest to that. And then if they want, she can also give, their bestseller probability, or she could sort but it's more about just taking that giant bucket of acquisitions, and instead of potentially some authors' potential acquisition being read by one editor who may or may not like that type of book, it's giving you a much greater probability that maybe it won't surface in that Where the Crawdad Sings, but 2 years from now, when Twilight's the new hit or whatever, maybe your book surfaces close to that. But it also, the way Marlowe works and the way she was built, is her feedback is all about helping that book improve. So publishers have been using that from an improvement standpoint. It might not be close to a bestseller now, but here are the ways that you could make it more likely. But are you going to fall into a path of where the formula might hurt you? Yes. Marlowe or any AI works on commonalities, right? Let's find commonalities and patterns amongst this. So you will have books that are outliers, right? That are just completely different than every book out there. And that book could get hurt by Marlowe because it isn't going to show up as similar to a bestseller, or it might not show up as close to being a bestseller norm. But so there's a chance that book's going to fall through the cracks. But there's also a chance that book would have been read by an editor who goes, this is way out there. We don't have a shelf to put this on. And they pass on it anyways.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that when something feels like it's difficult to categorize, that they're like this is great, but
yeah,
we don't know where to put it.
We love it. We don't know where to put it and how to sell it. Yeah.
Well, what I also got out of what you just said was that Twilight's coming back. So I am really excited about that.
I don't know.
Okay. So something else that comes up a lot with things like artificial intelligence is the concept that these computer programs, they're going to take people's jobs. So we won't need writers anymore. We won't need editors. So that's something else I wanted to ask you about. Do you like? How possible is that, or is that something that people are just like worried? They're like, is that something people should be worried about?
So I think it's so. First of all, I think there are certain jobs that should be worried, and I'll go into those in just a minute. But from me as an author, I got freaked out when I heard about GPT-3 and AI being able to create text. Right, that was a concern for me as an author. Right, and if this technology really evolves to a point, is it something that is going to be writing books and suddenly we have more competitors out there, right? So I think diving in deeper, I have to first say that there will be a moment in time when a computer can write a book that is non-detectable as being written by a computer. There is that point in time. But there's a big difference between a computer being able to write a book that can be passed as written by a human and a book being good. And then a book being great, right? Like those are different levels of things. And Nick Thacker said this really well. He said that human creativity is kind of like the last bastion. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Bastion of intelligence. And in order for an AI to develop creativity, it would require like super intelligence, which is like we're just now coming into like general artificial intelligence. Like super intelligence is so far out there. Like, is it something that we might have to encounter decades from now? Yes. But like it doesn't mean that there's not a time where in the near future where somebody might be able to give a book an outline and it creates, and it writes to that outline. But, an AI being able to come up with their own stories and then deliver on them in a satisfying way is so far off. All that being said, there are jobs that will be affected in the near future. There are jobs being affected right now by artificial intelligence in the book world. Audiobook narrators, Deep Zen is a company that is doing artificial AI narration that is pretty dang great. That being said, a Deep Zen book cannot be sold on ACX. It cannot be sold on Findaway. And it is not inexpensive. I mean, an author can still spend $1,000, on a Deep Zen produced book. So there will be some competition for narrators in the future. Audiobook proofing. There's another company in that world. It's Positron is how I would pronounce it. And it will pick up on mispronounced words, skipped words, changed words that, the difference between your script, and it's cheap. And I mean, that's fantastic. But how many audiobook proofers are out there that are going to lose? It's not like a huge market. Editors. We have, in my opinion, the most advanced developmental edit type of AI, right? And it still is not going to replace a human editor. It is a fantastic solution for someone who cannot afford a real editor, a human editor. But it can tell you that your book is slow in the beginning, but it's not going to tell you story ideas or scenes that you should move around. It's going to identify the problems, but a human editor is the one who's really going to help you fix that. Grammarly has, their level of line edits has put, I'm sure, a lot of, they can find typos, they can find that sort of thing. So has that affected some jobs in the editing world? Absolutely, But again, it's a difference of the audience. The authors that are typically using those often couldn't afford to hire a human to do those jobs. But those are the areas that I kind of see the most. I don't think we as authors need to worry about losing our job anytime soon. Where I see more risk, and right now, immediately, is in content spinning. And content spinning is when an AI goes in and replaces words and phrases with other words and phrases. And so it could go through a manuscript and completely rewrite that manuscript using different words. And where that's really dangerous is any pirated book out there, right? Could be put into a program, it reads it through, and then you have a different book that is really, the same book. Like that is what scares me the most today about AI, is that And it's not plagiarized because the words are different, but it is a theft of intellectual property. But it's one that is very, very hard to prove. And sometimes the courts have gone in favor of the authors and sometimes they haven't. And it's a very expensive battle to go down. So that is where that right now today I see as the biggest problem.
And is that something that, like, let's say someone gave a manuscript to a publisher, can they detect that? Or the whole point is that it's hidden so well that it's hard to detect?
That's the problem. A plagiarizer catcher won't catch it because there's no string of words that is the same, right? That is the same enough to be caught. So, and we have had traditionally published books that another author has come up and said, this book is too similar to mine. And they do page by page, side by side comparisons. And you can see these, and so there have been traditionally published books that have gotten big advances, that have sold and become bestsellers, that have had these accusations. I'm not saying that they, but they're a strong enough comparison that it makes you stop and really think about it. So that's an issue. And so we can see how close books are to each other, right? In the recommendations, like, oh, these books are most similar. And we can see, so there's a distance score between those books and all these different, like 62 different categories of how it's comparing the books to each other. And we can see if it's abnormally similar. And that is how, like, for example, authors have been outed, right? Like Robert Gilbreth was outed as J.K. Rowling, right? Because it was like, oh, the writing style is outside of the norm of similarity. So that's one thing we're kind of looking at, focusing. It's not a focus right now for us, but we should be able to identify that sort of thing. Would it stand up in court? I don't know, but it could definitely alert a publisher that this is a problem. Yeah. But most of these people, I think, aren't going the traditional route. They're content spinning the book. They're putting a great looking cover and a nice blurb up, and then they're selling it.
Right, like self-publishing it. Right. Yeah. Gosh. Okay. Well, and you mentioned about the editors being replaced, that kind of thing. So a lot of these AI programs to me seem like they kind of like supplement, but they still have a human that it's like kind of like a first step, like something like Grammarly or whatever.
Great,
it's like
self-edit edition.
Yeah. But the audiobook thing is interesting that you mentioned, because I was talking with someone who produces audiobooks, and they said that there's technology where they're trying to license the voice of, let's say, someone like James Earl Jones. And then you'll have this AI version of James Earl Jones's amazing voice reading your audiobook. And then people that are great audiobook, like narrators, they won't have a job, or some of them will start losing jobs because someone's like, well, I could have someone who's unknown, or I could have James Earl Jones. And so, that is going to be a problem. It's interesting you mentioned that the whole writing aspect, because to me, I'm also an author publisher, and it's like it comes from your heart, like who you are as a human. So it does seem very difficult to have a computer create something that is as heartfelt, because it didn't live a life, and so you base it on things that happen to you, all these terrible and great things. So anyway, I mean, have you read any of these AI generated novels? Have you?
Yeah, I've read, and I mean, I haven't read entire novels, but I've read scenes that were written by AI. And, they're not bad. Like, they definitely need a human to go on top of them, because you'll have something like really weird, right? Like, I don't know, like, he pulled, like, we're in the middle of a business meeting and he pulls a sword from his sheath, like, it's like, like what? So there's definitely, like, it is far from perfect. But it is interesting. It's scary, but it's interesting because it's not terrible, and I do think that the AI can be intelligent enough to go, okay, we've had a period of slow pacing. Now we need to ramp up the pacing. Here are the ways I could ramp up pacing. I could put in an action scene, and so suddenly that happens. And just before I forget, talking about licensing voices and things like that, the other potential upside is if you are a famous narrator, I mean, famous, like, I don't mean like James Earl Jones, but I mean, like, if you are a successful narrator, you can also license your voice to these programs. So they could potentially earn revenue that way. But I definitely think there's more risk for them in that whole area than there is. I don't mean by licensing, but if I was anyone that was going to be concerned, I would be a narrator.
Yeah. Oh, well, watch out there, Hey, we're just saying, we're the messenger. Don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, we're the messenger. I love narrators.
So I want to ask you about AI and marketing, because there are, so what are some things in like book marketing that AIs like help to really improve?
Yeah, so the first is targeting. Like a lot of us are using AI and we don't know it. Well, I'll put it this way. A lot of AI is happening in the back end that we don't necessarily see. But where we as authors can use it in the marketing, and where publishers and anyone else is, mainly audience targeting, segmentation, keywords, that sort of thing. So currently, I'm not really aware of any products that are doing it right now, but I know like we have a lot of things in development, and I'm sure there are other things that are in development. And I've seen a lot of startup companies pop up that have been often disappear. But if you can have if you can have an AI go in and read your book and then provide a list of 100 keywords, fantastic. If you can have an AI go in and read your book and then provide a list of 100 books and authors that are most similar to your book, there's, that does a lot of our work with AMS ads right there. Book descriptions are being written by AI using GPT-3 now. A lot of those programs are in beta, so they're not necessarily available right now, but they are going to be in the next 6 months to a year. It'll be, and there already are some certain things like you can use like article services, right? They have this a lot for blog posts, right? Or so you could use a program that typically rewrites blog posts or something like that and put in your existing book description and it can rewrite it for you, or put in an outline, or they will be an AI that can outline your book for you. Again, that's on the craft side. But in terms of marketing, it's really just targeting, comps, and figuring out where you should properly be positioned in the market. That's where I see the most future in the near future. Most possibilities in the near future. Sorry.
Yeah. So then, and also I read like a book title, even like something like it'll generate based on what's in that genre, what's selling well, and what might like get people's eye. It'll create a book title that is something that it's like it's going to sell even better, which is really interesting.
And I can tell you, I mean, I'm very confident that retailers turn publishers like Amazon, they know what the most searched phrases are, the most searched, and there's no way that they're not using. If they're not using it, there's no way they're not using that information to help them guide their title choices.
Yeah, and then also in terms of the when you're marketing, like I guess it will create the copy itself, like that you'll then like maybe a press release or something, right? Like it's just like it goes through your book, and then also based on other books, it just creates this copy, and then I guess people will reread that and then they'll adjust it, but it gets the ball rolling so that
give you the dough that you can then make something with. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned about like technology. Like, is there something that's on the horizon that you're like, I'm really excited about this, like that we should be looking out for, that'll be great for publishers?
I mean, I'm biased because where my attention is 24/7 is book recommendations. So I'm personally really excited in that area because I see massive potential for discoverability. I think publishers' backlist is something that they are very clueless on. And it's just the way the business is, right? You know what your front list is, you know what you're publishing then, but then people move, people change companies, and the backlist often gets forgotten. And it's hard to know. So when you have a hit like Cirque or something like that, and it's and you have no idea what you have back there that might fit it perfectly. I had a traditionally published book, The Girl in 6C. It was about a recluse shut in. It would have been great to market during COVID and all that. I mean, I don't think my publisher has any clue it even exists, right? Like it's not like there's just not. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for that. I also think the way that readers are buying books today is archaic. I mean, it's just they're visiting retailer sites or they're going into a bookstore and they're just wandering around the site trying to find their book, right? And the best thing they can go off of is customers who bought this also bought. And those books are really just books that were selected by marketing departments that are the newest books, that are similar in their mind, similar to it. So if you could have an AI and someone says, I want the Da Vinci Code, but I want it on a pirate ship, and that AI could look through 1 million books and say, here you go. Or if they say that I want, The Client by John Grisham, but with heavy sex, or they want, I want 50 Shades Grey, but no sex, right? Like if you could deliver like your ideal perfect book, or an AI could look at your top 50 books and find the commonalities between them and then create a list of your ideal books. I mean, first of all, we lose readers all the time. I mean, our younger generations will read books that are assigned to them in school, and then they might pick up 1 or 2 books. But how many readers are born because they read that one book? And oftentimes it's been like Harry Potter or Twilight or something like that goes, oh my God, like this is why people love reading. Like, it's like a new world to them. And then they dive in, but then every time they read a book that just doesn't do it for them, it's one more kind of strike against us. And it's one more time that like, oh, there's this new show on Netflix, or no, and we lose them. A lot of times we lose them. So if we could have a higher percentage of readers who read a book and love it, then that would be great for all of us. I mean, it would be great for everything in our industry. And it shouldn't matter if that book is 10 years old or if it's brand new or if it has never been discovered by readers. I mean, I think there's a great opportunity for undiscovered books to surface if we're really using the stories to pick and display those books versus metadata and sales data.
Yeah. So, and what is this on a retail site, or where does this exist? Like, is it a website that people go to and they type in "I like blank" and then it comes up with the books?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't exist right now. So we have the tech. That's what we've built. That's our AI technology. But so right now we're just adding books to the library, and then the plan is to put it on BingeBooks.com. But it would be a fantastic acquisition for any retailer who's really interested in not selling ad placement, right? But a lot of retailers are. I mean, there are a lot of retailers, and I think it would be great for in-bookstore technology, so when someone goes up to the desk or they can go to a kiosk, and they can build their perfect book, or they can look at close book recommendations. We already have the technology. It's really just how is it going to be presented and how is it going to be used. So it's not far off. I mean, it's already here. It's just finding the right vehicle.
Yeah, and I 100% agree that there's too much focus on the new, like all the new books, and there are literally millions and millions of books out there that
amazing.
And people just, because what's on the shelves, if they go to like a bookstore, it's literally just what's physically there. And even if you go online, like you were saying, because of all these algorithms, they're throwing at you whatever the newest things are. But yeah, and it's, all these people that have, I don't know, like 30 years ago. I mean, things like TikTok, Book Talk are helping to bring back older, right? Yeah, so that's promising. But I do agree that'd be awesome if there was a technology that you go to a bookstore and then they just go boop boop boop, and they type in whatever you say, and then it comes up with the great books in that area that are 30 years old, 2 days old, whatever. Yeah.
And if you want, then you could filter it, right? You could filter it by books that are in KU, or you could filter it by books that are within 5 years old, or you could filter it by books that are in a certain genre, or or that did have a certain level of sales success or review rating or whatever, but you don't have to. And that was some of the most fun conversations we have, like on the data scientist team, is what makes a reader love a book? And it is not an easy question, because when you ask a reader, and we've done reader surveys, but to be honest, we don't really know why we love a book. And that's why it's easier, like for our AI, to look at, if we know you love these 50 books or these 100 books, okay, she can figure out what is the common factors in these books that make you love them. But because that's the question, let's say I love John Grisham, right? Like, I love John Grisham's books. I'll read every one of them. Okay, if Marlo identifies that there's this other author who writes 98% similarly to John Grisham, but writes historical fiction, not legal thrillers, right? Or historical thrillers, is that something that reader is interested in? Is that reader interested in seeing those titles? Or do they only want to stay in that genre? And I think the answer that we finally came to is we just have to let the readers pick. Like, we have to give them the closest matches. And then if they want to filter down, or if they want to do certain check boxes, then they can make that decision.
Yeah, and I do also agree, that we focus so much on genre and things like that are easy to identify versus, like you were saying, like writing style, things like that your average reader or bookseller, someone or librarian or somebody who's normally recommending books might not know as well, that like whatever flowery language versus like really simple or whatever, like they might not be thinking about that. Like you were saying, AI technology is built to then look at that. I agree that, like, in terms of publishers, like, it really could be very helpful, because, like you were saying, some of these publishers, like, have published like hundreds of books or something, and like they can't even keep track of all the books, and so it'll help them go through and like you were saying, maybe market during a particular time when there's something happening in the news that's like, oh my gosh, like, this has become a huge thing. We had a book written in 1947 that was about this or something.
So one of the areas, though, that I'm super excited about is when you talk about heat levels and sexuality rating, really, because with movies you have G, PG, PG-13, and R, but with books, readers are really going in blind, right? So, and this is a problem like with violence and language, but where it really becomes a problem is sexuality, especially with younger readers, but also with fully adult women or men who don't want to read certain things. And so with romance, you have everything from super chaste Amish romance, they don't touch each other, to raunchy, full-fledged books that have every other, page is a scene. And it's become very hard for readers to understand what they're looking at when they're looking at a book, whether it's on the bookshelf or whether it's on a website. And that is in part due to the retailers. Retailers have cracked down so much on what can be put on a cover and what can be put in a book description. And I was talking to Amazon last week, and I asked about male nipple. Okay, so you used to see Fabio on the cover. Now, if a male nipple is on a cover, it will start to be hidden from results, right? It will be diminished. It will be hidden in some ways. Same thing, any flag words. So it used to be you'd see couples embracing on the cover, not anymore. You can do it. You might get banned. You won't be able to run ads on your book. So what you're seeing, that's why illustrated covers are all the rage right now. And book descriptions are super, super tame, because you can't use certain language that you used to use to communicate that a book was more spicy. So you have readers that are just going in blind and they really don't know. So they have to depend on the author name, and that hurts newer authors. So if you could look at a book and see a clear AI created, sexuality score that is in that book, and it would be great to see the same for language or for violence levels, also for middle grades and young adult books. I think that will be very powerful. It will help retailers. It'll help readers. And I think it will help those authors, because the super clean audience wants the super clean books, and the, dirtier audience wants the dirtier books. So we need to help readers.
I only want perfectly clean. So
Okay.
this is for
I
me.
will write you down for that. Yeah. All right. Are you okay with male nipple on the cover?
I'm blushing. So for people listening, they don't know that, but that's fine. This podcast just became rated R. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's really interesting, and it's that they're cracking down on that. It's like they think it's obscene or something. I mean, this has been around for a long
It's
time.
about making everything okay for a general audience, right?
Yeah.
They don't, I think also they don't like scrolling through like the top bestseller list and seeing a bunch of what seems like sexual content. So that's, and the same, I think, with retailer shelves, but you can't do advertising. I write, majority of my backlist is romance. And advertising is really hard. It's hard on Facebook. It's funny because it used to be on Facebook, you could do anything, right? Almost, I mean, within reason. And that really came down in the last 4 or 5 years. And the retailers going the same path, like just the safer path is the cleaner content.
That's interesting.
At least be displayed as cleaner content.
I mean, but romance is still one of the top selling like genres like ever. So somehow it's still doing well, but
it's still happening underground. Yeah, it's just not marketed in that manner as much.
Huh. We're kind of coming close. I mean, so I want to make sure that is there any other thing that you wanted to mention about AI? Beforehand, because again, I was like, when you did the webinar, I was like, this is really cool, interesting, and I just didn't know that there was controversy about it. So I appreciate you for talking about both sides of it, because obviously you have a vested interest in the people being excited about it. But yeah, there's obviously things that, and it comes down to the people using the technology for the right purposes, and we all know humans are perfect and would never do anything unseemly, so I guess we'll be fine.
Yeah, I would just say, like, my parting thought is there's always positive and negatives, right? And as soon as you have a new technology or a new path or a new area where there are possibilities, there are going to be people that use it in a negative way. That's unfortunately the way it is. There are a lot of possibilities through AI that can help curb that, right? That can catch plagiarism or that can catch future, content spinning. But are there negatives? 100%. Like, am I concerned as an author creatively right now? I mean, I think it's the same type of concern that graphics designers or artists, like, painters and things like that, they're also now competing with AI art in that space. So, and it's coming into songs, it's coming into music, it's coming in a lot of different ways. So I think we should be aware of it and informed. But in terms of creativity, artificial intelligence is a long way from that. So we are, at least for the next, 10 years, I would say, protected against that. And we may come to the point again where an AI can write a book that passes off as being written by a human, but I do not believe we have to worry about them writing a great book, or one that readers will really fall in love with.
I'm trying to work on the third book in my trilogy, and if I could just give it to an AI to write it, that'd be great.
Even if it's garbage, like, just give you some, some sand in your sandbox, right?
Yeah. So you had a book come out on September 27th, Familiar Stranger. So congrats. It's awesome that you have a lot of, hands in different places of the business.
Irons in the fire. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So congrats. And I'm sure you ran that through Marlowe Pro. So I'm sure
I did. Yeah. Yep. Every draft. I run every draft through Marlowe, to help make sure. Yeah. I also like to see the changes from one draft to another. And how my pacing changes. I do pretty drastic changes. But she points out some cool things, like she has a cliche finder and she points out my frequently used phrases. So I've been able to clean up. I've seen an improvement the last few years. Now, the more I know about my writing, the more I can see my issues.
Well, something tells me that the word male nipple comes up in your books, and it's like, okay, can you just cut on that?
Yeah. I removed all mentions of any male nipple.
Everyone should make sure to check out the Marlowe Pro IBPA member benefit. It's 15% off an annual subscription, which is 24 Marlowe Pro reports, and you get a free manuscript analysis through Marlowe Pro. So it's, you have to become a member to get it. So just throwing it out there, maybe you should become a member. And we hope that you'll keep listening to this podcast. It drops every last Thursday of every month. And also make sure to go to the IBPA website, ibpa-online.org. Alessandra, this has been really interesting. I actually, like I told you, I had a bunch of questions. I had more, but I think we hit on all the good stuff, the good content. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you for coming on and talking about this.
I had a fantastic time. Thank you for having me. I really love being here.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much and have a good day.